All right. As I was trying to explain to Ken that as my eldest daughter, I have 3 daughters, they've all grown up, left the house, they're all off at university, and my eldest, when she was in high school, would complain that, in her opinion, I had the worst case of ADD of anyone in her high school. And that was actually a hugely insightful moment, because I realized that had they had Ritalin when I was a kid, I too could have gone to a good school like NC State. But because they did not have Ritalin, I've never mastered or overcome my handicap. And my handicap is that I get bored astoundingly easily, as in halfway through a sentence most of the time. So the one thing I'm not going to do is speak to the topic that I'm supposed to speak to, because if I spoke to the topic I was supposed to speak to, it would have meant I'd prepared a talk, and the very act of preparing the talk would bore me, and so I would bore you guys, and that's what we don't want to do. So I was on my way over here, I was doing, what do I talk to these guys about? The only problem is, I've actually, the last couple of weeks, been working on a topic that has been distracting me, so I never actually got a chance to answer that question. So instead of giving you a talk that actually makes sense, that you might actually want to hear, I figure I'll talk about the things that are bugging me, and then when we go to questions, instead of questions, maybe you guys can give me answers to the things that are bugging me. So, Rhonda, keep tabs on this. There's 3 sort of markers that I got to get through if I'm going to get. We're going to talk about Adam Smith. We're going to talk about Ray Kurzweil. And then we're going to talk about Hewlett-Packard. And if I do this right, you'll actually see a connection between the 3 of those. And if I lose my place, Rhonda's going to remind me of where I'm supposed to be. Okay. So on the one topic of leadership, or of business, actually, why entrepreneurship, why business is important, it relates back to Adam Smith. When I came out of college, I was a huge Adam Smith fan. And the reason I was a big Adam Smith, he was the guy who developed the concept that in a free market democracy, the citizen and the consumer are the same person. So his quote is that a bunch of entrepreneurs working in their own self-interest will create as much value in society as the most enlightened monarch or government in his day. And the thesis is simply this, which is, if in a free market democracy the citizen and the consumer are the same person, the neat thing about business is the citizens get to vote with their wallets as to what they want. It's not a question of trying to be nice and lobbying some politician to deliver whatever the good is that you need. You go to Walmart and you buy it. And as a businessman, your job is to figure out how to sell products in Walmart. And it's profoundly sort of liberating, because what it does do is, when people congratulate me about open source and, Red Hat was really important. In fact, it was the cool thing. Any of you guys walk across from Red Hat? Any Red Hat guys? Good. It was really the cool thing about the early days working at Red Hat, and as I understand it, it's still one of the really cool things about Red Hat, is unlike working at real companies where you go to conferences, I'm serious, and you guys will have lived this. Unlike working at real companies where you go to conferences and no one really cares about you. And you've got to go out into the aisle and grab people by the collar and drag them into your booth and beat them on the head to get them to pay attention to whatever you're trying to sell. At Red Hat, you don't so much as have customers as you have fans. In most cases, if the world opened up and swallowed your company whole and closed up again, no one would know that you were gone. If you were working for a car rental company and Avis disappeared, well, you still got Hertz, you still got Enterprise, who cares? If you're into coffee and Starbucks disappears, well, other than me, because I like Starbucks, you still have Cup of Joe and you still have everyone who will sell you coffee. But Red Hat had this special place, that we were doing something that no one believed could be turned into a business. So they all understood they wanted control over the technology they were using, but the whole software industry believed that you couldn't make money if you gave your product away for free. And that was and is, as I understand it, to this day, the cool thing about Red Hat is you are actually, in an Adam Smith-like material way, by building a highly profitable business that is now one of the, and I still have a hard time saying this with a straight face, that is now a Fortune 500 company. This is a company that, 93 is 15 years ago, was operating out of my wife's sewing closet. And I'm not kidding. We had no money. We couldn't afford office space. So I moved all my wife's threads, and it's a long story, but I literally was operating out of my wife's sewing closet. And it's a Fortune 500 company. It's astounding. But it's Adam Smith. It's Adam Smith at work. I mean, that was the cool adventure at Red Hat. So now we're doing Lulu. Fast forward here. And my challenge, Mark Ewing actually articulated. Mark, by the way, is the co-founder of Red Hat. And we're an unusual couple of co-founders because we aren't actually co-founders. We're actually both founders. And to this very day, there's actually a debate about which one of us should be referred to as the founder of Red Hat. Because I founded a little company called ACC Corp. And I started distributing, Tom Miller knows this story really well, I started distributing Linux on CD through my website. And very quickly, this is before the internet, so we're talking news groups, and it was the comp.os.linux announce group that I would spam the world with, announcements about my latest product or whatever, and please buy, from ACC bookstore and catalog. So I had that thing going, and we were actually doing a good little bit of business. We were actually selling about 1,000 copies of Linux a month, and I would ask my customers, what other things should I add to my catalog? And a couple of customers said, hey, you should talk to this kid down in North Carolina doing something called Red Hat, because it's actually a better architected. It's not complete, it's not there yet, but he's going in the right direction. So I call up Mark, who's doing this a Linux distribution called Red Hat out of his spare bedroom down here in Durham. His wife is teaching at Duke. She was keeping him in the lifestyle to which he wanted to be accustomed. So I was operating out of my wife's sewing closet. He's operating out of his spare bedroom. And we have this very funny conversation where I go, Mark, a couple of my customers say what you're doing is better than Slackware and Yggdrasil and some of the other Linux distributions. So, if you'll give me an exclusive opportunity, I'll switch sell. I'll put my old typewriter sales hat on, and I'll switch sell. I probably should be able to switch sell about 10% of my customers from Slackware over to Red Hat. So, send me 3 months supply, 90 days. So, I had 1,000 copies a month, it's 100, that's 300, send me 300 copies. Dead silence at the end of the phone. Mark finally admits that he was only thinking of manufacturing 300 copies. Well, I knew how little he was going to charge me for this, so I knew this kid was starving to death. And I'm an Adam Smith capitalist. What we both recognized very quickly is I needed a product that I could brand, and he needed some sales and marketing and finance help. So we merged our little businesses. In effect, my little company, ACC Corp, Inc., bought the copyrights and the trademarks and the computers that Mark was using in return for shares. And that is what became Red Hat. The problem is, who's the founder? I founded ACC Corp, which is the legal entity that today is Red Hat Inc., a Fortune 500 company. But Mark founded the sole proprietorship that was actually named Red Hat. So who's the founder? We weren't co-founders because we didn't start together. We never have been able to solve that. So as a result, we refer to each other as co-founders. even though I'm actually the founder. Okay, here's the problem. Lulu's going really well. Let's fast forward. Lulu started in 2002, did it? For the first couple of years, we were really doing beta work. We were just playing in the sense of trying to build out enough functionality that someone like Tom Miller could actually publish a book. He did. He published a little technical manual on Lulu. He bought 3 copies of his technical manual. This is in late 2002. Rhonda and I, who were the only people at Red Hat still who were working there then, are still to this day astounded that anyone was able to publish anything on Lulu in 2002. So Tom published, I was actually telling him the story, he hadn't heard this one. He publishes his book in 2002 and he buys 3 copies. He shows up on our bestseller list. So fast forward, we finally got out of beta sort of 2004, and since then we've been doubling the business every year. To give you an idea, in 2005, these are rough numbers. Don't ask Rhonda to verify these because she'll deny it all categorically. But in 2005, we did about 6, 7, 8, I got to work this back, about $2 million worth of business. 2006, we would have done 5. 2007, we did about 12. No, I'm a year ahead of myself. So anyways, we've been doubling. We did about $24 million worth of business last year in 2007, and we're on track to double that number again this year. Okay, and good gross margins. We have plans to improve our gross margins dramatically. Rhonda and I still, to this day, have this debate now of are we profitable? Rhonda keeps reminding me that we're actually spending more money than we bring in. And I remind her of a phenomenon that we saw about a year ago. We stopped the company to do one of these conferences where we get, because technology companies are, Matthew Zulik speaks to this really well, technology companies are simply the collective intellect of their employees. As Matthew Zulik says, the whole of the IP, every item on the balance sheet at Red Hat of any value, walks out the door at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock or 7 or 8 or 9 or whenever you guys get to go home, and doesn't come back till the next morning because it's in the heads of the smart guys at Red Hat who actually make this work. So we had this conference where we were trying to collect some of the collective knowledge at Lulu, and we took everyone we could afford off the front lines, off their day jobs, and for a solid week, we did nothing but review all the good ideas that maybe we had missed the year before. Okay, so now keep in mind, we took 90%. There was all of 80 of us or so at the time. So, whatever, we took 70-something people off their day jobs, and we went to an offsite, and we did nothing but think for that week. The outcome of this week, we did more business that week than we had the week before. So, of course, the next week, Rhonda and I have this debate of are we profitable? And I go, well, depends how many of those people we actually employ next week. Because the beauty of internet businesses, Amazon could send all of their staff home. They do as much business next week as they did this week employing all these guys. Having said that, you're in the technology business. Moves a million miles an hour. If you aren't reinventing yourself, you will be obsolete in a number of months, maybe a year, a couple of years if you're lucky. Unless you own a monopoly like Microsoft, in which case you probably got a couple of decades. But nonetheless, the thing is still true. And so the question is, are we profitable? I'm not really sure. I know that I could send everyone home and be really profitable, at least for a short period of time. So we're now an established, successful business. We're going to double this year. We're recruiting aggressively, very senior management. We have a new president and chief operating officer, a fellow by the name of Bryce Boothby, who's in turn recruiting chief financial officers and the other really talented people who have helped build big businesses before, and we're bringing them to Lulu to turn us into an even bigger business, because it's one thing to get yourself from $0 to 20 million. It's something else again, as the guys at Red Hat can vouch for, to get yourself from 20 million to $1 billion. requires a whole different set of skills, and that's what we're recruiting for. And we're going through all of the pain, which you can be sure there's a lot of, and all of the angst as we restructure our business. But my job, keep in mind, the way I think of management, or leadership, if you like, if we're back onto this topic, is not authority and not function. I think of it in terms of time. So if you're a frontline staff member, if your job is customer service, your time, your responsibility is in fact today. Your job is to make the customer happy today. And when tomorrow comes, your job is to make the customer happy tomorrow. But it's a 24-hour window. Your boss, the guy who runs customer service, is training people to do your job, and the training is going to take at least a couple of weeks. The recruiting piece, golly, another X number of weeks. So he's typically thinking this quarter. The next 90 days is his job. You work all the way back and you get all the way to a guy like me, who, now that we have a president and chief operating officer, is basically unemployed. But I do hold the title of CEO, so what's my job? And as near as I can tell, the way I describe my job is 5 years out. I don't have to worry about this quarter. I don't worry about this year. I don't even worry about next year. That's assured. I mean, we have all these smart guys. Kimberly, Rhonda, all of the rest of them, Leah, Catherine, it goes on and on, who are going to make us successful no matter how much damage I do to the business. So what's my job? And my job is to make sure that what we are investing in will still be relevant 5 years from now. Okay, here's the conundrum on my way over. The reason I can't figure out what the hell I should be talking to you guys about. What the hell is the internet going to look like in 5 years? Okay, and here's where Ray Kurzweil kicks in. Ray Kurzweil is a very tenured technology inventor. He's now well into his 60s. And his current shtick is studying. He's been at this for 20 years. And he's beginning to see patterns that he thinks are astoundingly interesting. And his patterns are that we all take technology advance for granted. His thesis is the rate of technology advance is moving exponentially. And he goes back to not this millennium, the start of this millennium as in 2000. He goes back to 1000 AD. And he posits the thesis of how quickly did technology advance in 1000 AD. His argument is it actually advanced exponentially, even though we don't see it, because at the start of 1000, I can't remember his examples, but for example, it might be at 1000 they didn't have gunpowder, and at 1100 AD they did, as an example. Seen from our level of technology, it looks like technology was absolutely flat in the first century of that millennium. We can't tell, looking backwards archaeologically, any significant difference at all. But to the people who had lived 90 years in that century, it would have looked night and day. Okay, so if you do that for each of these centuries, you see this huge progression that gets to where we are. But Kurzweil's thesis, and he actually writes about this in his latest book called Singularity. And you got to remember, I'm a really bad student, so I've read the Coles Notes version of this thing. But the thesis, as I understand it, of his book, he coined the term singularity before the Matrix movies did. And they basically stole the concept from him, which is that at some point in the not too distant future, and his prediction is only 30 years, hard drive space or storage space on the average computer will be so great, will be exponentially greater than it is today. And the processing power of the average computer will equally be exponentially greater than it is today, to the point where, and one other trend is aligning with this, which is we are discovering that everything about human beings is digital, or can be represented as being digital. Your DNA, your RNA, your memories is all electrons. So he's saying the advances into this, as we apply more computing power, we will eventually be able to put all of your memory and all of your computing power, your thought processes, and all your DNA and all your RNA into a model on a computer that will look and behave exactly like you. scary thought. Okay, well, I'm an Adam Smith capitalist. I go, no, we aren't. We're only going to do it if there's some consumer demand for it, if it's available in Walmart, and if we choose to do it because it makes our life better. Maybe we don't get sick anymore. By operating on computers instead of real world lives, maybe we don't get viruses. Oh, crap. Sorry, computer viruses, it's a little joke. I don't know what the future holds. What I found fascinating about Kurzweil's thesis is not the conclusions that Kurzweil gets to. It's the fundamental assumptions that Kurzweil proves, which is that technology is moving at a stupidly fast rate. And his thesis, his test of it is, check out what people are predicting. The smartest guys in the industry, where they think we will be. What's the next big thing and how soon will it get here? He says, they're always right, but they're wrong in time frame, and they're always wrong in the same way. They overestimate the length of time it's going to take to decode the DNA, for example, of human beings. The latest one is trying to understand actually how RNA triggers DNA, because we were all worried for a while there that our DNA made us very fatalistic. If you had DNA that was going to cause some terrible disease, there was nothing you can do about it. The latest innovations, I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to this, that I find fascinating is they're discovering that RNA, which they thought was this little messenger tool that no one really studied, is actually the thing that triggers whichever of your genes gets triggered when it gets triggered. And you can actually control your DNA just fine if only we can figure out how the hell this RNA stuff actually works. Okay, this is all just hobbies. We all sort of read this because some of us have ADD and we can't stay focused on what we should be doing, and instead of which we read /dot and we read all sorts of unrelated stuff to what we should be doing. Okay, so the thesis that I'm struggling with is, how does Lulu remain relevant if not only are we trying to double every year, but if it's safe to say that 5 years from now, 99% of our revenue will consist of things that Lulu currently doesn't do. Okay. And Lulu's CEO is this guy who came out of university with such a bad education that the best job he could get was as a typewriter salesman. I mean, I'm not kidding. You guys think I'm kidding. A little bit of success, everyone thinks I must be a smart guy. Back in the old days, you guys all grew up in a more understanding academic world where they didn't post the grades to your class on an exam on the classroom door. That's what they did when I was a kid. I mean, it was cruel and heartless, but it didn't worry me because I always thought they used to list them alphabetically with a last name like Young. And I'm not kidding. I mean, literally, they could have listed them alphabetically. So I was a really bad student, and I'm convinced that I'm now, as a 50, how old am I? Well into my 50s. As a 50-year-old, I'm no longer capable of keeping up with where this crap is going. I mean, it's going at such a pace. And there's some old guys like me in the audience, and it's not your fault. You and I don't want it to change anymore, Our ability to keep up with it. It's these kids. They're the evil ones. And it's because they have malleable minds. They get used to things. They get used to things in nanoseconds that you and I take 5 years to just understand. My father can't turn on a computer. He doesn't know where the on-off switch is. Anyways, we won't go there. He's a really smart guy. He went to Harvard. He went to Cambridge in England. He's a really smart guy. Not a chance at 84 years old is he going to learn how to use a computer. He can still think at the level of a Warren Buffett if it comes to sort of financial analysis, but he can't turn on a computer. The 10-year-olds can use computers better than most of the computer science kids here. I was talking to a friend whose son is, this guy is a bit of a geek. He's running a technology company. His 11-year-old son is debating the benefits of Linux versus Solaris with him when he goes home at the end of work. As I say, he's a bit of a geek. Okay, So the point is, the rate of change is accelerating, and Lulu has no idea what it's going to be. We don't know what we should do. Management is not capable of figuring it out. So how do we figure it out? This is where Hewlett-Packard kicks in. So this is the best answer I can come up with. Is that how does it go? Bill Hewlett and Dave Packard got together in like 1938 to build a company that made vacuum tube-based test and measurement equipment. And their company grew consistently every year despite the innovator's dilemma, despite the fact that their expertise was in vacuum tubes when transistors came along. And then their expertise was in transistors when silicon chips came along. And now they're how big are Hewlett-Packard? They're really big. And Bill Hewlett and Dave Packard would argue that they weren't smart enough to do this. So their thesis is that they built a culture that identified the key things, identified they needed incredibly smart guys. They needed to focus on making those smart guys successful. So they worked on the opposite premise that a lot of organizations do. A lot of organizations hire people and then they beat on their employees to make the organization successful. Hewlett and Packard's mantra was, how did they help their employees be successful? So this is where we're spending our time. And what we're trying to think through at Lulu, because I'm not smart enough to deal with the rate of change that Kurzweil talks about, is how do I build an environment that really smart people like to work for? And that when they like to work there, they are able to launch projects that in turn make them successful. This is, Google is obviously worried about exactly the same phenomenon. I presume you guys, many of you have heard the Google sort of employee benefit, where they give you, what is it, Tom, 20% of your time to work on unique projects of your choosing, outside of work time. I read a great article on Google that was a little more realistic about it, and a couple of Google employees were quoted as saying, yeah, we get 20% of our time to work on things outside of our day jobs at Google, and that typically happens between 9 and 1 in the morning. So the short answer is Google is a typical technology company. It's a high-stress, high-performance, highly competitive environment. Everyone works stupid hours, and so the 20% of your time that you get to work on your own project is time that auto workers at GM would consider time and a half. And it actually begs the question. This is a complete aside, by the way, unrelated to anything else. In my career, I've lived through a couple of generations of technology companies, computer leasing, obviously Red Hat, now Lulu. And most of the guys who I knew in technology back in the late 70s and the 80s, who are hugely successful, are no longer in technology. They now sell life insurance or they do real estate development. That's true with a lot of my colleagues at Red Hat today who have left Red Hat. They're not in technology either. And the reason you get out of technology is because to be successful in technology, you put in a pretty typical day, like anyone else. You put in an 8-hour day. The only problem with it is that you then get to go home at 5 o'clock and have dinner with the kids. And then once the kids are put to bed, at least this was the story in my case, you get to go back to work and put in the second 8 hours that are required in order to be competent the following day. And that second 8 hours is either the reason you're in the technology business, because you got ADD like myself, and it's just cool, the rate of change, the cool things that people like Google are doing, is fascinating all by itself. In fact, the cool things your competitors are doing. So all of my friends from the 80s are no longer in technology simply because they want to live a regular life. They go, Bob, once you figure out how to make money building houses, you know how to make money building houses. And you'll know it for the rest of your life. No one's changing how you build houses. Okay, they change it once every quarter century, maybe. So that's the aside. So that's kind of where we're going. or at least where I'm going. Of course, you talk to the engineering team at Red Hat. Sorry, try that again. At Lulu. Sorry, it's my Freudian slip. Our engineering team at Lulu, they will talk to you about specifics. They will talk to you about building social tagging technology into Lulu storefronts. They will talk about building, what was the big one? We had to convert our European bank so that we could take Maestro cards. How many of you even know what a Maestro card is? Poor Rhonda. Rhonda is our head of our finance for Lulu, and she has the scars on Maestro cards. Lulu thinks of ourselves, well, every internet company is by definition a global company. The moment you launch a website, everyone on the planet has access to your products and services. You actually have to go out of your way to discourage people in Afghanistan from buying things from you. You know, you have to make it difficult for them. You have to insist that they pay with an American credit card or that they pay North Carolina sales tax. If you don't do that, if you think of your business as a global business, there's no reason you can't be as successful in Peru as you are in North Carolina. Just as a complete other aside on sort of where we're going. So, where was I? If I tick my boxes, I started with Adam Smith, which sort of explains why we do what we do. We're trying to make the world a better place. And we're trying to do it in a significant way. And it's more fun and it's more measurable than doing it in a philanthropic way. The not-for-profit that we founded, Mark Ewing and I founded, called Center for the Public Domain, was referred to as venture philanthropy. What you do is you put a big pile of money into a not-for-profit and you tell the executive director that their job is not to manage the money. In fact, their job, unlike most businesses, is just the reverse. Their job is to spend the money as rapidly as they can to solve the problem that they were addressing. So the Center for the Public Domain was addressing the problem of intellectual property legislation, and that there was so little public debate on the issue of intellectual property, copyrights, and patents that you had things like the Disney, the Mickey Mouse amendments. I don't know, how many of you guys pay attention to intellectual property? Okay, so for those of you who don't, copyright at the end of the Second World War was 20 years long. Today, copyright is pretty much 100 years long. How did it go from 20 years to 100 years? Who decided this? It's a great story, because who decided it was not even Disney Corporation. It was Mickey Mouse. And so it's a Mickey Mouse amendment, not in the sense of being an insult to the congressional legislative process. It was a Mickey Mouse amendment in that every time Mickey Mouse was about to fall into the public domain, Disney would go up to Capitol Hill and say, this just isn't right. You know, we've invested hundreds of millions of dollars building this huge brand around Mickey Mouse, and it shouldn't fall into the public domain. And the legislators all go, yeah, that makes sense. We can't see why Mickey Mouse should fall into the public domain. So they would add 20 years to the copyright term. And copyright is such a boring field that no one paid any attention to it. Not the New York Times, not anyone else. And they did this like 5 times in a row, and suddenly copyright's 100 years. And suddenly you have people going, how did copyright get to be 100 years? And why can't I use a story that was written in 1920 that has been out of print for half a century? And it's because copyright on that story that was written in 1920 that has been out of print for half a century is still copyrighted by someone. And if you use it and make a lot of money, you can be sure that someone will find you and extract money from you. And it's actually complicated, the whole world of publishing, just to no end, for no good reason other than Mickey Mouse was about to fall into the public domain. So the whole point to our philanthropic effort was simply to improve the quality of the debate. I didn't know, maybe copyright should be 100 years. What I did know is without good public debate, we were going to get bad legislation. And so we helped fund things like Larry Lessig's Creative Commons and a bunch of other things. And we ran through our $15 million in 4.5 years. And we had a material impact on the subject. The problem with it, however, is there was no measurement. How do you know our philanthropy had any value? And this is what I love about Adam Smith and about business, is you can actually calculate how much value your company is providing to our society at large. And that value can be calculated as how many resources from our society did you consume creating the product or the service versus how much value did your consumers vote with their pocketbooks and say that it was worth this much money to them, i.e., how much revenue did you get in for your products and service versus how much cost did you incur delivering that? And assuming that there is a positive difference in there, that positive difference, otherwise known as your profit, is the net increase in value that you create in society. It's a really simple calculation. Of course, like every really simple calculation, it's not a complete calculation. But it's just a hugely sort of inspiring one because unlike philanthropy, you can actually measure it. You can measure the progress you're making. You can measure how many customers think what you're doing is important. In philanthropy, it was really hard to do. So that's why I love Adam Smith. That's why I love doing business. And I guess that's the point. So now I'd like to go to questions, or as I say, answers. And you guys can tell me how I solve the Kurzweil problem. The fact that I'm trying to build this big successful business and I have no idea what the environment that I'm building it for is going to look like. Any tips? Or other questions? Tom, you must have thought about this problem for me.
Well, by the time you did the answer, I'd be up here instead of you.
Oh, curses. Sure, go ahead.
I'm curious as to your perception of IBM as an open source company. I think they sort of mentioned themselves as one.
I'm a big fan of IBM as an open source company. In fact, I've been a big fan of IBM up to the retirement of Thomas Watson Jr. and subsequent to the turnaround that Lou Gerstner achieved. IBM really lost its way in that middle period. And what Gerstner drove IBM, because I dealt with IBM sort of in those middle years, and IBM was one of these businesses that was in business for the benefit of IBM employees. It was a very inward-looking company. Gerstner said, what the hell are we doing? We're in business to look after customers. And he then tried to figure out from the customer what the value that IBM was delivering was. So I like the IBM open source strategy. They are not an open source company in the way that Red Hat is. It's not in their DNA. It's highly tactical. But it's highly tactical on a customer-facing perspective. Because what Gerstner recognized that IBM was doing and the value they were delivering was not mainframe computers or personal computers. It was solving customer problems. And IBM had more collective knowledge in its 100,000 employees around the world about how to solve computing problems than any other company on the planet, otherwise known as services. And so if you're in the services business, if that's the primary value you're doing for customers, why do you have to sell them things at all? And so suddenly their proprietary software model, which they still do and they still make lots of money at, they go, well, hold on, if open source software enables us to deliver better, cheaper, and faster software, and better yet, deliver control of software to our customers, if our customers can build more reliable, more customized systems for their own use by using open source software, and our value to our customers is not in the products, it's in the services. It's in helping that customer use these technologies to become more effective. Why would we not sell them open source software? This is a fellow called, and I'm going to screw up the name, Irving Wadowski? Wadowski, yeah, that's right. It's a double-barrel last name. That's right. Thank you. He was the one who explained it to me. In fact, in 1990, I think it was in 99, he wrote a white paper on the topic of open source that my engineers forwarded to me and said, why can't anyone at Red Hat write a better article on open source? He understood it, and he understood it was about value for customers. It wasn't about proprietary versus open source. Sure.
So, Bob, if you've got a 5-year
flexibility inside of Lulu so that it doesn't have to see 5 years out, but it can react to things it sees 3 years out or 2 years out? Maybe it's changing so much.
I don't know. I'm just a typewriter salesman. You need Bryce Boothby up here. He'll try to explain that one to you. I'll tell you some of the tricks we use, because I think more in terms of tricks than process. As I say, I'm a typewriter salesman. I'm not a process guy. I've never worked for a company as big as Red Hat is today, much less tried to manage one. One of our tricks in terms of empowering our staff on this process, on this flexibility issue, is we talk about our org chart in a inverted pyramid fashion. So normally when you write an org chart, you put, you start with the board of directors because of course they represent the shareholders, and then you get to the CEO, and the CEO's got a bunch of guys, and they've got a bunch of guys, and you end up with this nice pyramid thing to the point where down here, that computer service person that you hired yesterday is clearly at the bottom of the org chart, and he or she reports to someone who reports to someone who reports to someone who, and this is even true at Lulu, reports to someone who reports to someone who reports to the board. And they feel completely disenfranchised. It's a job. Someone pays them $10 an hour, they come to work. The problem with this model is who's below the customer service person? And of course, the answer is the customer. And any decently run business you will ever meet on the planet is we don't love our customers. Let me correct a common misperception. We hate our customers. Customers are so much damn work. They're demanding, they're cheap, they're constantly threatening to go to the competition if you don't knock your price down another gazillion dollars. So what is it about customers? And the answer is we are all customer besotted, more than customer focused. We understand that the org chart has to work like this, because your customers are why you come to work in the morning. It's as simple as that. They are the only reason you go to work in the morning is because you have a customer. So by definition, that customer service person who you hired last week, who's at the bottom of a traditional org chart at Lulu, is at the top of the org chart. And it works all the way down, same way at Lulu, just reverse that really complicated org chart, and you get all the way down to the guy who washes the coffee mugs, i.e. myself. And I refer to myself on our website as the chief coffee mug washer. And there's actually a reason for that. Everyone thinks I'm being cute, and isn't that humbling and self-effacing? But there's actually real sort of reality to it, and it works like this. Again, my mission is 5 years out. That's my job, is to worry about things 5 years out. If your job is to worry about 5 years out, what do you think all of these guys who have to work on organizational efficiency for serving customers today think about you? You're the biggest pain in the ass they know, because you're constantly distracting them from doing what they know they should be doing today, because you don't think it's what's going to get you where you need to go 5 years out. And you're holding them accountable to rethink what they're doing today, not to do it the way they would have done it just to solve today's problem, but to do it in such a way that it will in fact get us to where we need to be 5 years out, even though the CEO has no idea where we're going 5 years out. Okay, so the beauty of this structure and of being the coffee mug washer is at Lulu on a regular basis, I'll go into the break room, and all these slobs who work for me, can't wash a coffee mug to save their life, but this actually makes my day, because it allows me to do something that day where I know for a fact I've added value to the company. Other questions? Sure.
Looking 5 years out, you can't obviously draw a clear picture of what the environment is like, but you probably are trying to identify trends and convergence of trends. Can you speak to your prognostications in that regard?
Yeah, that's actually the fun part of my job, is that I get to read Kurzweil's book. Tom here, the professor at NC State, I pick on Tom all the time, just because he and I go way back. But anyways, he constantly is teaching his students, you have to learn how to think critically. So the trick is, when you learn something, it's Scott Fitzgerald's line. Okay, the sign of a first-class intelligence is the ability to keep two opposing concepts in mind at the same time and retain the ability to function. Okay, so interesting enough, this was a fun day for me because I was over at UNC talking to Paul Jones's library science student class, and I'm pontificating on how wonderful Adam Smith was. And a kid in the back of the class goes, well, do you realize Adam Smith was wrong on this point and whatever? And so I got to pull out F. Scott Fitzgerald's line by saying, well, of course, he was only a human being. He's bound to be wrong at least 49% of the time. So yeah, that's trying to watch trend lines, what the VCs do for a living. Is a big part of my day job, and it's the fun part of my day job. It's what makes that second 8 hours when I go home at night sort of worthwhile. Is you get to work with all these smart guys and girls at, I'm going to skip that, smart guys, and guys being unisex for my purpose. These smart people who all have a different angle on what is going to happen. And the fun part I get is to try and see patterns in all this random crap that people throw at me. And occasionally I see a pattern, but mostly what I see are smart people. And the neat thing about identifying smart people, of seeing enough patterns that you recognize that, pick a name at Lulu, is actually someone we can build on because they are someone who are thinking outside the box of what they are doing. And so there's someone we can give more authority to, because if we can harness the collective intellect of our business, we will do much better. It's sort of a convoluted way, because the catch with it is, in terms of making decisions, every single decision is made in a different way. Because the factors that affect that decision, the factors that affect the decision that Rhonda and I had to make about switching banks in order to accept Maestro cards in Europe, was a very different decision process than the one that Rich Davis makes when he chooses to link to Delicious for our user tagging technology. And you either get thoroughly intimidated by the complexity of what we're doing, or that's actually why you go to work in the morning, because it's fascinating stuff.
I see another trajectory here. Going back to, you were founder of Red Hat, and at that time you were worrying, what in the heck are we going to do in 5 years from now?
Yes.
And guess what happened?
What's that?
In about 5 years from that point, you founded Zulu.
Lulu.
Lulu,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And my trajectory here is 5 years from now, you'll be founding something else, and like Red Hat is doing just fine today. Lulu is going to be doing just fine 5 years from now.
No.
But you will be doing something else.
Okay, maybe. That's actually a really interesting topic. How much time do we have? Are we out of time? Okay, we'll keep going. Once we get out of time, if you have to go home, just go home. Thank you for listening. We'll do the formal bit. Thank you for coming and listening to me. Now you can go home. Okay, so coming back to your... that would be true if I didn't hold myself to the same standards that I'm holding my colleagues at Lulu, which is I want them to get smarter than they are today. So, by the way, on leadership, here's how you become successful. It's the only method I know, and it works like this. It's actually hugely liberating when you think about it. All you have to be is a little bit better tomorrow. Okay, the key piece is little bit better. The reason it works so well is because if you keep doing that every day, so every day you want to be a little bit better than you were the day before, And here's the really liberating bit. You can start by being really, really bad today. Because all you have to be is a little bit better tomorrow. And if you acknowledge that you're really, really bad today, it becomes really easy to be a little bit better tomorrow. That's why you want to start by acknowledging that you're really, really bad, because it allows you to be a little bit better. Okay, but you keep doing that every day. You keep getting a little bit better the next day. And then, as John Maynard Keynes, the economist, puts it, the magic of compound interest kicks in. Because not only are you getting better tomorrow, but you're adding to the bit that you got better yesterday. And you do that for a year 365 times, and then you do it the next year another 365 times. And each day, you're not starting from scratch. You're starting from all the little bit betters that you built on for the previous year. Eventually, you're not going to be that bad. You might even be good. But the trick is to keep getting a little bit better. So if I'm actually going to get better, I got to challenge myself. I can't just do the same thing again. You know, I've done this all the time, so what's my next shtick? And that's where Hewlett-Packard kicks in. You know, so I want to build the next Hewlett-Packard. Well, and of course, I'm not going to do it. Rhonda's going to do it for me, and I'm going to take credit for all the brilliant work Rhonda does. Sure. No, interestingly enough, Mr. Hurd, what's his first name? Is it Doug Hurd? The current CEO at Hewlett-Packard has turned, Mark Hurd, thank you, has turned Hewlett-Packard around faster than anyone could have believed that it could have been turned around. And he turned it around by reading Hewlett-Packard's book. He basically just got everyone at Hewlett-Packard to go back to doing it the way they used to do it. And it's been astounding to them. So actually, it's Hewlett-Packard today. Well, not really Hewlett-Packard today, because Hewlett and Packard started when they were, 32 years old? And I'm already 50-something years old. So, you know, they last until their 80s, and Hewlett-Packard was only doing $80 billion at the time they retired. So I can't get to Hewlett, using the same extrapolation, I can't quite get to Hewlett-Packard today in a reasonable sort of career. Although, by the way, a complete aside again, my favorite guy, if you haven't picked this up with my outs and abouts, I'm Canadian. And my favorite role model I discovered a couple of years ago when I had my midlife crisis. I turned 50. And as all you young whippersnappers will learn, when you turn 50, it's the end of the world. Okay, there's no hope for you. It's all downhill from there. So I was reading a book by a fellow called Pierre Burton, it was one of his series on, damned if I can remember. But anyways, he got onto the topic of a fellow called John Smith. And John Smith was a Canadian businessman who became the wealthiest guy in Canada. And he became the wealthiest guy in Canada despite the fact that he worked as a factor. He ran a small trading office for the Hudson's Bay Company, trading beads for furs in northern Canada until he was 51 years old. And when he was 51 years old, he took his life savings, which was peanuts, several tens of thousands of dollars in today's money, and moved to Montreal. And from when he was 51 years old, as a poor middle-class guy living in Montreal, he became Canada's wealthiest human being. His trick is that he continued working until he was 93. He had a 41-year career after he turned 51 years old. There's hope for me yet. Sorry, yeah.
So if you like Kurzweil, because he's formulated the problem, can you name two visionaries that you would admire that maybe have some interesting techniques you think about?
Mr. Hewlett and Mr. Packard to start with. The Watsons were pretty good guys at extracting a lot of value out of their staff by their mantras of respect for the individual. Who else do I like? Who I don't like. Not that I don't like them. I think they're astoundingly talented. Steve Jobs at Apple. clearly a genius in our industry. But he's a little bit like DeCastro at Data General. Sorry, for you young kids, Data General was a competitor of Digital Equipment Company. DeCastro built it into a $2 billion a year business, and when he retired, within 24 months, it was sold for scrap. Because every decision at Data General went through DeCastro's office. And he built a culture that was not success-oriented. It was a culture that was risk avoidance because you sent every decision through DeCastro's office. Steve Jobs is building a similar culture at Apple. I worry about Apple the day Steve Jobs retires. The catch is, Steve Jobs is my age or so, and he might have another 40 years at Apple. So I do not advise you to short Apple stock just yet. But nonetheless, he's not a hero of mine because I don't know how to do what Steve Jobs does. Hewlett and Packard are better role models for me. Sure.
Have you ever read Nicholas Black Swan book, predicting
I have not. Is that worth doing?
It's a bestseller recently about this kind of non-predictable events, and your company was actually mentioned in it, Red Hat.
Oh, okay.
And the internet boom was another one. And my question is the effort really better placed sometimes in building an organization that can respond to the unpredictability of what's going to happen
Yes.
than trying to make these predictions? Because I remember when we were children, we used to see predictions like flying cars, spaceships, Club Med apps, things like that. And those things never happened. We spent money. And one of the things I admire about Microsoft, so far, I don't work for Microsoft.
Yeah.
They seem to have responded very well to when the black swan of the internet hit.
Yep.
They immediately, like a beehive, just got ready and reoriented.
No, I agree. My line on Microsoft, by the way, having worked in the open source world and with Red Hat, is Microsoft are full of incredibly talented guys. And that's exactly right. They respond really well. They're an incredibly effective company. And when I start saying this in front of sort of open source and Red Hat guys, everyone starts looking at me funny. So I typically admit that, yes, Microsoft do evil things. It's just that they do them so well. You have to admire the guys. But you're right. That's exactly what Hewlett Packard does, is they don't invent the future. They respond to the future very effectively. You do a certain amount of inventing the future, but there's no money in inventing the future. The money is serving customers' needs today. So the money is the boring stuff, serving mainstream markets, not early adopter markets. But to be successful, you actually have to do both, because you have to train the kids, you have to train your staff today in what is coming. Because your managers, your 40-year-olds who can manage budgets and lead teams, are being trained today. And by the time the technology that they're seeing, the Facebooks today, the Second Life technologies, by the time those technologies are mainstream, if we've treated our team properly, we will have one or more managers who are going to be able to figure out how to monetize that 10 or 15 years ago when it's a mainstream. Years from now when it's a mainstream service. Sorry, Ken. One more question. Who's got an interesting question? We'll take 2 questions. We don't want you guys to fight. Okay, sorry, Rhonda, remember that. It's the open, sorry, say that again. Open docs format, yeah, okay, all right. And the other question was?
Yeah, you mentioned smart people and tricks. I'm wondering what your tricks are for making sure you're hiring smart people.
I have a very evil trick. And it's not a trick at all. So I'll take them in reverse order. My evil trick, I actually hire really badly, which is why I'm not in charge of hiring anymore. We have Kimberly and Leah Catherine in charge of hiring. My method of hiring is I hire any schmo off the street, and then when he turns out not to be smart, I fire him. And I hire someone else. And eventually, process, trial and error, you end up with a team of pretty smart guys who all work like dogs because they're nervous I'm going to fire them too. And I smile all the time while I'm doing this. So I get away with it. But it's not really a very good model. So you'll have to check with Kimberly as to a good model for doing that. So open docs. Fascinating. You know how some people like to go rush home at 1 o'clock and watch soap operas because they're stuck on their story of what are the open docs and Microsoft's plays around, open standards is my definition of a soap opera. You have villains and you have heroes and you have love affairs and you have, it's so cool. It's a preamble to a point that my wife always makes when I say, that's a really good question. And she always pipes up and says, well, that's because he doesn't know the answer. And that is a really good question. It's a very long answer. I really like the initiatives. I'm really suspicious of everything Microsoft ever proposes in that field because they are just so much smarter than you and I are, that even if they're way over on the Richard Stallman side of standards from where you and I sit, you know that there's an evil genius at work there somewhere. So that's as far as I go on the topic. It's a deep one, but it's a fascinating story. I'm just glued to every little episode I get to watch on Slashdot or wherever.
Well, maybe I can rephrase it and say that how important is open documents for customers, having them the ability to open their documents in the future without a proprietary wrapper around it?
Oh, okay. There was a big threat. Yeah, so let's talk about the narrow one. I don't believe Microsoft or anyone else is going to be successful at closing documents, is my prediction. And there's been a series of initiatives. In fact, at Lulu, I've spent 5 years thinking about DRM, for example. And I've been convinced for 5 years that one day there will be a DRM standard that will actually work. And we are going to, at Lulu, have to adopt it in order to serve our authors' desire to control their content. And 5 years later, there is no DRM that is making even the slightest degree of universal adoption. And you're getting record companies. You just had Random House audiobooks, just along with a whole bunch of, but they're the latest ones, yesterday morning, who have committed to distributing their audiobooks in an unencrypted open format because they understand that for them to play in a market dominated by Apple and Amazon, they have no chance to win if they adopt Apple or Amazon's DRM technology. And if they don't adopt a DRM technology, every store reseller, every electronic reseller on the planet can become a reseller for Random House audiobooks. The moment they adopt someone's DRM technology, they can only work with that vendor and his resellers. So this industry and these formats are moving along forward so quickly that if I was a betting man, and of course I just start companies, I'm not really a betting man at all. If I was a betting man, I would make the bet. I would take the bet that for the bulk of content distribution going into the future, the formats and the websites and the merchants who will win are the ones who look more like Red Hat than like Microsoft in the publishing and content distribution space. That's my prediction. I can be wrong. I've been wrong many, many times. It comes back to this point about reacting quickly to events. When I'm wrong, I'll be using Microsoft's DRM faster than anyone. But that's my prediction. We watch this space like a hawk, and as I say, it's a fascinating one. Again, thank you very much for listening to me today.